So, Daredevil Born Again has been undergoing a lot of changes, and alongside that, we get a lot of new updates. This is a highly anticipated show for me because the Netflix Daredevil was one of my favorite shows of all time. However, with the quality of a lot of Marvel Disney Plus shows and many of the weird updates like the main cast not completely returning, hiring extremely inexperienced writers, and the overall direction of the show, I grew quite weary of it. Lo and behold, the original one got cancelled in favor of a creative overhaul, and with all the new updates surrounding the show, well, where does my anticipation lie now? Well, let's get into it. To be blunt, I'm a lot more excited and hopeful for Daredevil Born Again. One of my main concerns behind the original version of the show were the creatives behind it. I understand you can't get the original creative team behind the Netflix Daredevil back either due to scheduling or simply having the preference for a new creative vision. But the people Marvel hired were the guys who did a movie called Deck the Halls and some basic drama called Covert Affairs. Not exactly the type of quality stuff you'd associate with something as prestige as Daredevil. Alongside that, the directors were gonna range a lot, which isn't abnormal at all for TV, I recognize that, but I was hoping for something more tonally consistent and for the show to have a clear vision. Well, lucky for us, we got some new talented directors who are going to be directing the remaining episodes of the show. The new directors are Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead. I really like these directors. Even before their amazing run on Loki Season 2, I admired them as directors, as I really loved their Netflix movie with Anthony Mackie entitled Synchronic, which is an original crime sci-fi movie about a pill that you can take to travel through time for a short period. It's a really good movie. Even just watching the way they move the camera and how they tackle a serious tone makes me feel like they'll be a great fit for Daredevil. Not to mention, they did a great job on Loki Season 2. They managed to make the first Disney Plus Marvel season that I thoroughly enjoyed from beginning to end. It actually felt like there was some style in the directing, and I especially loved how they handled the character drama and spectacle. Wasn't a huge fan of the stuff they did on Moon Knight, but that was mainly due to script issues, and it seems like they had a lot more creative control over Loki Season 2, seeing as how they directed a majority of the season. They also seem quite dedicated as directors, as they did a lot of research on the character and watched the Netflix series to properly understand the character, so it shows to me that they truly do care. But if they have some good material to work with, I think they can do some great things. This leads me to talk about the showrunner. The new showrunner is Dario Scardapane, who was previously a showrunner on Punisher. While I'm not a huge fan of the Punisher show, I think it's pretty good, I still think this is a massive win. This is one of, if not the first Disney Plus show to have a showrunner, so that's already awesome. The previous Marvel Disney Plus TV shows didn't have showrunners, and some Marvel executives did basically admit that the approach they took to their shows was to treat them as movies. I don't know why they tried to reinvent the way of making TV, but I'm glad they finally realized they need a showrunner for a show. And yeah, even though I wasn't in love with the Punisher, it was still pretty good. And to have a showrunner from someone who has written in the Netflix Marvel universe is honestly just so reassuring to me personally. This part doesn't necessarily say anything one way or the other, but the showrunner for Daredevil Season 3 was a writer on Arrow Season 4, which was notoriously one of the worst seasons of superhero TV to ever exist. And then he made the masterpiece that was Daredevil Season 3. This isn't a totally fair comparison, as he didn't have a lot of creative control on Arrow, he was just some writer, but I'm just saying that the people can be limited in some ways, and their previous work doesn't entirely define what they're totally capable of. Next, the old stunt coordinator is coming back to do the fight scenes and be a second unit director. Again, this is simply showcasing to me that they truly do care to mimic that old style that was on Netflix. If you don't like the story or the show of Daredevil, which would be a sin, but if you didn't, I think everyone could agree that the fight scenes were always top tier. So the fact that we can get that look and feel back for the show in terms of fights and stunts is incredibly good news. Shows to me as well that they're actually considering the show to be canon and want the tone, feel, and continuity to feel similar. Which leads me into the next part, in that this show is actually officially considered to be canon. Vincent D'Onofrio went ahead and just outright said that it is canon. Alongside that, an official Marvel executive said that he considers it to be sacred timeline, which means being canon to the MCU. Then shortly thereafter, they added all the Marvel Netflix shows to the chronological MCU timeline on Disney Plus. Now, some people were already convinced that it was canon and has been canon since it was made, and others, like me, were pretty skeptical because if it was a canon 100%, then why not just be transparent about it? Well, we got our answer. Vincent D'Onofrio flat out said that it was not necessarily confirmed to be canon until after the restart of the show. After watching what had been filmed and written, the creatives simply realized that they should just make it canon, which is kinda funny to me, but but I'm so thankful for that. So up next, the thing that I'm most excited about is that Foggy and Karen are returning with Eldon Henson and Deborah Ann Woll reprising their roles. So this was first reported online, but I never knew how serious to take these reports unless they come from somewhere like The Hollywood Reporter or Deadline or whatever. So I wasn't 100% sure that they would actually return. However, the other day, it could not have been less ambiguous as we saw the main trio on set together filming. Like, I could not be more happy. This was insanely gratifying to see as a longtime Daredevil fan. I remember exactly where I was on Twitter and saw that the show was cancelled. It was 2019 and I was in pre-calculus in high school, and now 5 years later, as I slack off in my full-time job, I see on Twitter that they're returning. It brings me so much joy. Originally, Foggy was killed off-screen with Karen not even being mentioned, so holy cow, did we dodge a bullet. Part of the main reason why we all love this show as much as we do is because of the main cast. Yeah, we're here for Daredevil at the end of the day, but we're all in love with these three characters. Our Matt Murdock isn't truly himself without Foggy or Karen, so because they're essential to Matt having a heart. Something the MCU is also severely lacking nowadays is just having regular people in the MCU. Our side characters lately all have to be a spy or a secret agent or some person with superpowers or even a regular person that somehow gets involved in those superhero antics. Like, we can't just have journalists doing journalist things like Karen anymore, and I'm really sick of it. It's partly why the MCU lost its groundedness. It's no longer relatable to people to watch these things, which makes it so that it's actually just hard to engage with what's happening. Now, there is still a rumor that Karen and Foggy are going to get killed off in some way. Apparently, Deborah Ann Woll is only signed on to return as Karen for 3 episodes, so a lot of people think that she might get killed off. Alongside Foggy, since that's what originally happened, and the series is still taking a lot of material from what was written back then, so it's totally possible. But I mean, would they really bother bringing them back just to have them return for a very short amount of time and kill them off? I don't know. I mean, I guess in this day and age, that level of fan disrespect isn't unheard of, but I just kinda doubt it. And if they do get killed off, I hope it's as a flashback when the blip occurred. I think there's a very interesting story to tell of Matt during the blip, and especially if he lost everyone close to him. You could even tie the title Born Again into the blip, since the people who got snapped ended up returning, thus being born again. See what I did there? If you're listening, Marvel Studios, I am more than happy to work as a writer. Or even as an intern who gets coffee on the Daredevil set. But in all seriousness, I just think there's a lot of story potential either way, and I just hope that they do it all in a respectful way that makes sense to the narrative. But up next, we have another exciting return, and that's that Wilson Bethel will return as Bullseye. As of now, this is the most recent piece of news, and honestly, something that I was not quite expecting. With everybody else back, he was probably the next character that I would choose to return if I had the choice. Although I do want to say that I didn't need Bullseye back for Born Again, just because I was pretty satisfied with what I got from him in season 3, and I wouldn't have minded a focus on a different villain and then bringing Bullseye back later. But Deadline confirmed that he's going to be in 3 episodes, which is pretty good. It's a little sus that he's has the same amount of episodes as Karen, so hopefully that's not a bad sign. I just hope that they're also not forcing everybody back into this one season of Daredevil, because I do hope he has a decent role and isn't just there to be there. But it's just so refreshing that we really are getting a true Daredevil season 4, at least in some sense. Like, without a doubt. It does make me wonder how they'll approach including everyone and making a cohesive narrative, but I'll get into that later with some of my concerns. And the last major returning cast member is Jon Bernthal. It's essentially confirmed that he's going to return as the Punisher in Born Again. Obviously, I love my boy Frank, but I do hope that they don't overclutter this season just so they can bring everyone back. Although I did have this fear in Spider-Man No Way Home when they were seemingly just bringing everyone back, and they surprisingly balanced it all in a 2.5-hour movie, so anything's really possible, to be honest. The rumor is that he's going to return and be killing a bunch of corrupt cops who are misusing the Punisher symbol to make it stand for something else, so I really do hope that they commit with the violence for Punisher, don't tone it down, and just have Punisher be Punisher. The next big update I have here is that the show may not have 18 episodes, and I'm a little bit mixed about this. Speaking about my worries about things being too cluttered or if there's enough room to flesh everything out, so with the show having 18 episodes, it is most likely because the show had to to restart filming and went through a complete creative overhaul, and finishing 18 episodes would cause this series to come out late. I imagine they want to get this show out here as quickly as they can. And to be honest, I was pretty apprehensive about the show having 18 episodes in the first place. I mean, I was glad that it wasn't another freaking 6-episode event, but 18 was a tad bit too much for me personally. So hearing that it won't be that much makes me think it'll probably be closer to around 10 to 13 episodes, which I think is perfect for a season of superhero TV nowadays, especially if each episode is 50 to 60 minutes long and not like a cheap 30 to 40 minute episode with like 10 minutes of credits. A lower episode count to 10 to 13 episodes would ordinarily make me very happy, and is probably the amount of episodes I originally wanted for the show in the first place, but the reason I'm worried is that it was said that Marvel is going to keep a good amount of what was already filmed, and that they already filmed about half of the first part of the season, which could be around 5 to 6 episodes. So if the show is going to be, let's say, 13 episodes, then having the really bad ones in there is a bit concerning, as a good chunk of the show will be leftovers from a completely different creative team that they'll do their best to salvage into the new creative overhaul. I'm just worried that the show won't feel cohesive and that it'll feel like two conflicting creative visions morphed into one season. But I'm hoping they do more reshoots to make the old Born Again stuff fit in with the new vision. For instance, it was rumored that Foggy and Karen were killed off in the original show off screen, but since they're alive, how is that going to affect the episodes that were already shot where they were killed off? I imagine they'll just include the characters and write them off for a bit in a clever way, but my point is that the creative visions might clash a bit. Now, part of this isn't as worrying because the first episode has been completely rewritten by the new showrunner, which gives me faith that the first episode will set a proper tone of what we should expect for the rest of the season. And it seems that Foggy and Karen are returning for that first episode, so let's say that they're only coming back for 3 episodes, maybe they get blipped or injured and come back for the last 2 episodes of the show or something. That's something I'd be fine with, at least for the first season of Born Again. Obviously, I'd prefer them to be in the entire season as main characters, but beggars can't be choosers at this point. But hopefully with a rewritten and reshot pilot, the show can have a more coherent tone for the rest of it, and maybe they can reshoot and do some rewrites for some of the other episodes to make the overall narrative flow a bit better. The next bit of exciting news is that Machuw is reportedly the main villain of the show. Now, I don't really know much about the guy, but from what I do know is that he's a fairly new villain in the comics and is basically a serial killer who sucks in sensory information around him, which can make Daredevil's senses hard to target him. He sees himself as an artist and turns his murders into works of art, literally using blood for his paint to get his messages across. I guess the closest thing I could compare him to is the main antagonist from the movie Seven. I think a movie villain simply being a serial killer can be a nice change of pace and sounds like a really entertaining villain for Daredevil to face off against. And I'm excited that we can get a new villain so that it's not just Bullseye and Kingpin again. I want a new, interesting character study of a new villain, and I hope they can do this character some justice and make me love and hate him in the best possible way. The show will most likely be TVMA due to credible sources, and since Echo was TVMA, I think that's a huge hint that Daredevil will have the same rating. This was something that I'd been saying that they need to do for a while. I mean, you don't necessarily need Daredevil to be TVMA to be good, but I mean, why limit it to TV14 when we've clearly seen that TVMA is the best fit for the show? Sure, TV14 can still be good, but it definitely wouldn't be as good, and there's no reason to put those limitations on it. It seems Marvel is willing to experiment with TVMA shows and disconnected stories now because of the Marvel Spotlight banner, which is basically as if it were to have premiered on Marvel Netflix. The point of Spotlight is to show viewers that what they're about to watch is going to be something relatively disconnected from the larger narrative and is more character focused rather than about the universe itself. So if they're developing a whole banner of shows for this to fall under, I don't have much doubt that Daredevil will premiere under this. I also think that Echo is just a way to test the waters in it. I didn't watch much of Echo because I genuinely couldn't get through it, but from what I heard, it wasn't very violent in the first place, and that's because changing it to TVMA was kind of a last-minute choice. It was designed in a way to be either TV14 or TVMA, and they decided to just add a bit of gore and violence in post-production, and that's about it. So it's basically just a TV14 show with a slight edge. But I hope with this creative overhaul, they actually have it planned to be TVMA from the start and use it to their advantage. Marvel is in desperate need of more diverse art in their category since everything is feeling the same nowadays, and then again, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Everybody already loved the show so much for its TVMA rating, so there's literally no reason to go and change that. So the show had a completely different tone and direction before. Apparently, it was going to feel like a cable drama that was more focused on Matt Murdock as a lawyer, and Daredevil appears in its costume around episode 5, so it was going to feel more like Suits in the MCU, but with Daredevil, which is kind of an odd choice. And the Netflix show wasn't even considered canon until after the restart, so the new creatives told the executives how it needed to be done, which is what caused the return of Foggy and Karen as well. So a lot of the stuff wouldn't have even have happened if not for the restarts, which is just wow, a huge blessing in disguise. Now, a part of me is sort of troubled by the fact that they had a series where Karen and Foggy didn't return and probably killed off screen and didn't even make the original series canon. I mean, that definitely doesn't sit right with me. It seems as if Kevin Feige wanted to bait us into watching his version of Daredevil by simply casting the same beloved actors in order to get us to watch this new version of Daredevil. This is the prime example of what borrowed trust is, and I really don't like that they had that in mind in the first place. It just feels really dirty to me to cast Charlie Cox and Vincent D'Onofrio back as the same characters, but basically make a new version of Daredevil that isn't at all faithful to the Netflix version. I totally understand wanting to do your own thing and make your own version of Daredevil, but if you're going to do that, you should cast new actors. Bringing back the same actors comes with this expectation that it's the same one, and we should expect the same or similar tone from those characters. It's kinda insane to me that a version of Daredevil like this got this far into the production process in the first place, especially since they filmed nearly half of the first season and realized how awful it was. Like, how does it even get that far without people like Kevin Feige knowing that beforehand? It does raise a larger concern for me that things like that can just happen. So I hope they truly slow down in making movies and shows, because that's kinda unacceptable. But that seemingly is what they're doing, and I mean, better late than never, so I'm definitely overjoyed that we're essentially getting a Daredevil season 4. And really, at the end of the day, I do respect Kevin Feige for having the guts to basically admit that he was wrong to cancel the show and do a complete creative overhaul. It would have undeniably been much easier for the guy to just continue what he'd already started and just not redo the show. I mean, it would have been much cheaper that way. I think it was genuinely a very brave decision to just take a pause and realize that you need to make something really great here, and then it needs more time for that to happen. At the end of the day, it shows me that everyone behind the scenes just wants the best for the show, and thankfully, it seems like we're back on track now. But we'll have to wait and see. We'll definitely be getting some more set photos, so I'll probably have another Daredevil update video in the near future, and now I genuinely can't wait for the show to come out, which is so incredibly refreshing to say. For the first time in a while, I've got some hope for a new MCU project. But those are all my thoughts, and I'm very curious to hear what you guys have to say down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe. Peace.